Good morning. Welcome to the Date Series. The JW Date Series seeks to provide primary resources about important dates in JW history. The series hopes to benefit students and apologists seeking primary sources for papers and projects. It also hopes to assist Jehovah's Witnesses who are doing research on their history. Each JW date video begins with a brief summary of the date's significance and is followed by a slide presentation with multiple quotes from primary sources. Each is footnoted for ease of access or for writing. The slide presentation itself is available for download at the site listed on the last slide. If you would like other primary resources, please suggest topics in the section below. Thank you, and I hope you find this helpful. Good morning. The year that we're going to be looking at is 1874. Russell, following the Second Adventist, understood that this was going to be a year of rapture. The teaching was that when man had been on earth for 6,000 years, a rapture was going to occur and Christ was going to return. Russell had done the math, so to speak, and had determined that the year 1874 was the year that mankind had been on earth for 6,000 years. Now, the Second Adventists believed that Jesus was going to return visibly at that time. However, Russell had a slightly different take on that. He believed that Jesus was going to return invisibly to the earth. So the expectation was that in 1874, Jesus was going to return and that the church was going to be raptured and that there was going to be no more sin. A harvest was going to occur. From that point on, Jesus was going to be present invisibly. Rutherford followed that same teaching, and Rutherford, of course, followed Russell, and he continued to teach the same thing through the 1920s. He wrote a book in 1929, which is the last time that the date was evident, but wrote a book in 1929 speaking of 1874 and its certainty. However, in 1932, suddenly the year that Jesus returned was changed to 1914, and the 1874 date just simply wasn't mentioned. In 1943, a new chronology was developed, and that would be under yet another leader, and the year 1874 and 1799 were placed in the dustbin of human history and were no longer mentioned by the JWs. Welcome to the JW Date Series. As with previous series, if you check the last slide, you'll find that there will be a link to Google that will allow you to download the slides for your use in any presentation you're doing or for research purposes. Charles Taze Russell had initially studied under Pastor Wendell, who was a Second Adventist preacher, and he had been preaching that Jesus had returned in 1874. That information is found in an online site, theearlylifeofpastorrussell.com. Russell and Barber, in their book, The Three Worlds and the Harvest of This World, published in 1877, discussed at length the 1874 return of Jesus. They were under the opinion that it fit with a number of prophecies made in the Old Testament. They believed that a number of prophecies were in place that assured the 1874 date of being accurate. The 10th day of the 7th month, occurring October 1874, the end of the age. And then there will be a time of harvest.
Again, there was a great deal of speculation in the writings about the return of Jesus and the various Old Testament prophecies. There were a number of people during that time period that were preaching something very similar to this. One of those was a gentleman by the name of Wolf, who was preaching through Europe and Asia. Russell had a specific understanding of Christ's return, understanding that he was a new creature, he was a spirit, and he was invisible. This was noted in Zion's Watchtower and the Herald of Christ's Presence in 1883 August. Jesus was to return in 1878, and he was made king in 1878, at which time Satan's kingdom would begin to be reversed. And that's from the Watchtower reprints, October 1890. There were going to be 40 years of trouble beginning in 1874 and increasing chaos until 1914 when things should wrap up. And that was again in the Watchtower reprints, October 1890. In the Millennial Dawn, Volume 3, Thy Kingdom Come, 1891, Russell discusses the Millerite movement and says in essence that they were correct. They had simply misdated it, but if they'd been more aware, they would have altered their predictions by 30 years and been correct. So Russell's claim was that he and Miller basically had the same information. Miller had unfortunately misjudged by 30 years, but the information was sound and the same. In Thy Kingdom Come, 1891, Russell discusses the 6,000 years that humans had been on the earth and the fact that October 1874 was the end of that 6,000-year period. The date of the close of the battle, October 1914, and that's Watchtower reprints, January 15th, 1892. Watchtower reprints from July 15th, 1894 note that 1874 was the beginning of a 40-year harvest during which the institutions of this age will be brought down and obviously people will be saved. July 15th, Watchtower, 1905. The Lord is present since 1874. Watchtower, September 1922. Since 1874, the time of the Lord's return in power, complete change in God's operations. And Watchtower from March 1st, 1923. The proof shows that the Lord has been present since 1874. Watchtower, January 1st, 1924. No room for doubt. Jesus has returned, 1874. Watchtower, Joseph Franklin Rutherford writing in the book Prophecy. The scriptural proof is that the second presence of the Lord Jesus Christ began in 1874. Please note that in the early 1930s, he would change that prediction. What is Truth by Rutherford, 1932. He writes the year 1914, therefore marks the second coming of Christ. 1943, there was an official change of chronology. and 1874 was changed to 1914, and that is found in The Truth Shall Make You Free, of a 1943 book. In that same book, The Truth Shall Make You Free, there is the utilization of the year 607 BC, and that date is used to determine that 1914 is the year that all things will come to an end. The year 607 BC is demonstrably incorrect. It's worth noting that that new chronology, stating that 1914 was the return of Jesus, did away with the dates 1799, 1874, 1878, and 1881. They were no longer significant. These dates were earlier said to be absolutely assured to be true and that there was great biblical evidence to support them. But here they are, they're cast aside. We find that in the 1943 book, The Truth Shall Make You Free, that the return of Jesus was indeed 1914. And then he returns to his temple in 1918. There is 1922, in May 15th, the Watchtower declares, "We have no doubt whatever in regard to the chronology relating to the dates of 1874, 1914, 1918, and 1925.